The interrogation chamber aboard the Galactic Compliance Station hummed with sterile efficiency. Commander Vex Thalen of the Korvathi Enforcement Fleet sat across from the human, his 6 eyes narrowing in practiced intimidation. The human, designation, Dr. Sarah Chen, sat perfectly still, hands folded on the metal table between them. You understand the severity of your crimes? Vex Thalen's translator chip rendered his clicking mandibles into flat, emotionless standard. Dr. Chen met his gaze without flinching. I understand you believe I've committed crimes. Believe? Vex Thalen's carapace plates shifted in what his species considered a threatening display. You violated Galactic Medical Directive 739. You performed surgery on a Kelthrian ambassador without proper authorization. You introduced foreign biological agents into their system. I saved Ambassador Kelnash's life. The words hung in the recycled air. Vex Thalen's translator stuttered, recalibrating. That is, not relevant. The ambassador species has strict protocols regarding medical intervention. The Kelthrian hierarchs have filed formal charges. They demand your execution. Dr. Chen's expression didn't change. The ambassador was dying. Your medical teams refused to treat him because his cultural status prohibited invasive procedures. I watched him suffocate for 40 minutes while your doctors debated religious interpretations. And so you decided galactic law meant nothing? I decided his life meant something. Vex Thalen pulled up a holographic display, swiping through files with one of his lower appendages. Let me understand your species' philosophy, Dr. Chen. You are aware that humans are the only spacefaring race that maintains something called the Hippocratic Oath. One version of it, yes. First, do no harm. Vex Thalen's mandibles clicked in what might have been amusement. Yet your species has the bloodiest military history in the known galaxy. Your world wars. Your genocides. Your nuclear weapons. He leaned forward. How do you reconcile this contradiction? Dr. Chen was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice carried a weight that made even Vex Thalen's instinctive aggression pause. Because we know what harm looks like. We've done it. We've suffered it. We've refined it into an art form and a science. We've turned it on ourselves and on others. She leaned forward, matching his posture. And because we know harm so intimately, we also know mercy. Not as an abstract concept, Commander. As a choice we make every single day. Mercy is a luxury. Mercy is a discipline. Her voice cut through his. It's easy to follow protocols when nothing's at stake. It's easy to let someone die because the paperwork says so. What's hard is looking at a dying person and choosing to save them even when every regulation, every cultural norm, every superior officer tells you not to. Vex Thalen's 6 eyes blinked in sequence, a sign of genuine confusion among his kind. But you knew the consequences. The Kelthrian hierarchs will not accept your reasoning. They will push for maximum punishment. Your own Terran diplomatic corps has already distanced themselves from your actions. You will die for this. Probably. And you accept this? Dr. Chen smiled, and it was the saddest thing Vex Thalen had ever seen. Ambassador Kelnash has 3 children. Did you know that? 2 daughters and a son. They just started at the Kelthrian Science Academy. He showed me pictures while I was setting up the surgical suite. He was terrified, Commander. Not of dying, he'd accepted that. He was terrified they'd grow up without him. She stood slowly, her restraints allowing limited movement. So yes, I accept this. Because somewhere on Kelthra Prime, 3 kids still have their father. That's not a luxury. That's not weakness. That's what separates us from the monsters we used to be. The chamber fell silent except for the ambient hum of station life support. Vex Thalen found himself accessing files he'd ignored before, Dr. Chen's history. Medical volunteer in 3 separate war zones. Pioneer in xenobiology. 14 commendations from various species for humanitarian service. And now, a death sentence. The hierarchs arrive tomorrow, he said finally. They'll conduct the trial themselves. It will be quick. I understand. Vexthalen stood, preparing to leave. At the doorway, he paused, something unprecedented stirring in his thorax, the Korvathi organ most analogous to a heart. Dr. Chen, why do humans do this? Why do you fight so hard to save others when your own species barely survived your own self-destructive tendencies? She looked at him with eyes that had seen too much death and chosen life anyway. Because, Commander, we know what it costs to be monsters. And we've decided mercy is worth whatever price the universe asks us to pay. The door sealed behind him with a pneumatic hiss, leaving Dr. Sarah Chen alone in her cell, waiting for a trial she wouldn't survive, smiling at the thought of 3 children who would never know her name. The trial chamber was designed to intimidate. Vaulted ceiling stretched 30 meters high, carved from a single piece of dark Kelthrian stone that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. 7 hierarchs sat in elevated judgment seats, their ceremonial robes flowing like liquid shadow. Below them, in a containment field that hummed with barely restrained energy, Dr. Sarah Chen stood alone. No defense counsel. Kelthrian law didn't permit it for crimes of this magnitude. High Hierarch Zelmorty's voice echoed through the chamber, translated into dozens of languages simultaneously. The human doctor stands accused of violating the sacred autonomy of Ambassador Kelnash. She imposed her alien biology upon him, corrupting his body with foreign cellular matter, denying him the honorable death prescribed by our traditions. Chen remained silent. She'd been advised that speaking out of turn would add additional charges. The penalty, Zelmorty continued, is molecular disassembly. Does the accused understand? I do, Your Eminence. Does the accused wish to recant her actions? To express remorse for her violation of our most sacred? No. The word landed like a physical blow. The gallery, filled with diplomatic observers from 24 species, erupted in shocked whispers. Vexthalen, seated in the Korvathi observer section, felt his carapace plates tighten involuntarily. Zelmorty's triple-pupiled eyes widened. You refuse to show remorse? I can't show remorse for something I'd do again, Your Eminence. Remorse requires regret. I have none. The chamber fell deadly silent. Then this trial is concluded. I invoke right of voice. The shout came from the rear entrance. Every head turned as Ambassador Kelnash himself strode into the chamber, his ceremonial sash marking him as a full member of the diplomatic caste. His breathing was steady, strong, nothing like the dying gasps Vexthalen had read about in the medical reports. Ambassador, Zelmorty's voice carried a warning tone, you are the victim in these proceedings. Your testimony is not required. The evidence is clear. Then let me make it clearer. Kelnash moved to the testimony platform, his movements deliberate. I was dying. Not peacefully. Not with honor. I was drowning in my own fluids while our medical staff argued about which ancient text took precedence. My lung tissue was crystallizing. Do you know what that feels like, High Hierarch? Each breath like inhaling molten glass. The protocols exist for a reason. The protocols were written 6,000 years ago when we barely understood basic chemistry. Kelnash's voice cracked with emotion, a profound breach of Kelthrian courtroom decorum. Dr. Chen didn't just save my life. She did something I've never seen in 4 decades of diplomatic service. He turned to face the gallery. She asked my permission. The chamber erupted again. Zelmorty's gavel equivalent, a sonic pulse that made everyone's teeth ache, restored order. Impossible, the High Hierarch stated flatly. The medical logs show you were unconscious. I was fading in and out. She leaned close, spoke directly to me. Asked if I wanted to live. If I wanted to see my children again. She told me exactly what she planned to do, introduce nanite-enhanced stem cells, reconstruct my lung tissue, use a human-derived enzyme catalyst to accelerate healing. She said it would violate every regulation in the book. She said it might work. Kelnash's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. And she said the choice was mine. Vex Thalen found himself leaning forward in his seat, mandibles still. I said yes, Kelnash continued. I chose to live. She gave me that choice when your protocols would have taken it away. You were not in a state of sound judgment. I was in a state of drowning. Kelnash's composure finally shattered. I was conscious enough to know I was dying. Conscious enough to think about my son's graduation ceremony I'd miss. My daughter's research presentation. My youngest learning to navigate atmospheric flight. I was conscious enough to choose them over tradition. He turned to face Dr. Chen directly. She saved my life. Not despite my culture, but because she respected me enough to let me decide what my culture meant to me in that moment. Zelmorty's expression was unreadable. The law is clear, Ambassador. Your consent, even if genuine, does not supersede. Then change the law. The voice came from the diplomatic section. Ambassador Threlnk of the Vexian Concordat stood, her crystalline form refracting the chamber's dim light. The Concordat moves for an immediate recess to discuss precedent. This case has implications beyond Kelthrian jurisprudence. Another voice, the Korvathi Enforcement Fleet seconds this motion. Vex Thalen heard his own voice and felt a shock ripple through his nervous system. He just contradicted his orders to remain neutral. Within minutes, representatives from 9 different species were calling for recess, for review, for reconsideration. Zelmorty raised a hand, silencing them all with practiced authority. A recess will be granted. 24 standard hours. We will reconvene to hear additional testimony. His eyes fixed on Dr. Chen. But understand this, human, our laws exist to preserve our identity. To abandon them because they're inconvenient is to abandon ourselves. With respect, Your Eminence, Dr. Chen spoke quietly, I didn't ask you to abandon your laws. Ambassador Kelnash simply exercised a choice that should exist within them, the right to define his own death, or his own survival. That's not abandoning identity. That's claiming it. The High Hierarch's expression flickered, something that might have been doubt, or might have been anger. We shall see what the law decides, Dr. Chen. We shall see. As the chamber emptied, Vex Thalen watched the human doctor being led back to her cell. She walked with her head high, not like a prisoner approaching disassembly, but like someone who'd already won something more important than her own life. For the first time in his 30 years of enforcement service, Vex Thalen wondered if the laws he'd spent his career upholding were the right ones. Or simply the oldest ones. Vex Thalen found Dr. Chen in the observation deck during the recess, staring out at the star field beyond the station's shields. Security protocols should have prevented her access to this area, but someone, he suspected Ambassador Kelnash, had authorized it. Commander, she acknowledged without turning. Come to ensure I haven't escaped. The station is surrounded by 300 kilometers of hard vacuum. Where would you go? Fair point. She gestured to the viewport. I've been thinking about your question. Why humans do this? Why we fight so hard for mercy when we're so good at violence? Vex Thalen moved beside her, his compound eyes adjusting to the starlight. And have you found an answer? I found a story. Dr. Chen's reflection in the transparent aluminum showed a faint smile. About 150 years ago, before we made first contact, there was a war on Earth. A bad one. Chemical weapons, orbital bombardments, the works. Two sides convinced the other was irredeemably evil. She traced a pattern on the viewport, as if drawing constellations. There was a medic, military doctor, named James Reston. His unit was pinned down in a demolished city. Casualties on both sides. His commanding officer ordered him to treat only their soldiers, let the enemy wounded die. A logical military decision, Vex Thalen observed. Reston disobeyed. He treated everyone. Enemy soldiers, civilians, even a sniper who'd killed 3 of his friends an hour earlier. When his CO found out, Reston was court-martialed. Faced 20 years in military prison. What happened? At his trial, one of the enemy soldiers he'd saved testified. Through a translator, because they were still technically at war. The soldier said Reston had looked him in the eyes and said, "I don't care which side you're on. Right now, you're just someone who's hurt." That soldier became a resistance leader who pushed for peace negotiations. The war ended 8 months later. Dr. Chen turned to face him fully. Reston still served 5 years. But he saved thousands of lives, not just the soldiers, but everyone who would have died if the war continued. He chose mercy when everything told him to choose sides. And you see yourself as this Reston? No. Her voice was firm. I see humanity as Reston. Every single one of us carrying the capacity for incredible violence and incredible compassion, making the choice every day about which one wins. The observation deck door hissed open. Ambassador Threlnk floated in, her crystalline body chiming softly with each movement. Dr. Chen. Commander. I thought I might find you here. Ambassador, Vexthalen's mandibles clicked in formal greeting. The recess isn't over for another 18 hours. I'm aware. Which is why I wanted to speak privately. Threlnek's internal light pulsed, a sign of agitation in her species. I've been reviewing galactic medical law. Did you know there are 47 different species-specific protocols for end-of-life care? 47 different ways we've codified how death should occur. Cultural preservation is essential, Vexthalen began. Is it? Threlnek's light flared brighter. My people crystallize when we die. It's considered sacred. Our bodies become monuments, placed in the gallery of eternals. But 300 years ago, a Vexian named Shelterra was dying of a degenerative disorder. She begged for euthanasia, wanted to end her suffering before the crystallization made it permanent. Our laws said no. She spent her final 2 years in agony, and now her crystal form stands in the gallery, forever frozen in a posture of pain. The ambassador moved closer to the viewport. We call it the crystal of warning. A reminder of why our laws exist. But lately, I've wondered, is it a warning against breaking tradition, or a warning about what happens when we fall?